Welcome to Project HeadCanon. This is video number 13 of the Content Crosshair series, which dives deep into various Star Wars media to figure out what should be considered canon within the project. Today's video covers the classic 80s animated show, Droids, The Adventures of R2-D2 and C-3PO. For the sake of efficiency, I'm including the TV movie The Great Heep in this analysis, since it takes place in between two of the show's normal episodes. The show is set around 15 BBY, about 4 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith. There are 3 multi-episode arcs to the show, and I'll cover each of them briefly here. The first arc has C-3PO and R2-D2 stranded on the planet Ingo, where they are picked up by 2 speeder racers, Thal Jobin and Jord Dusat. Ingo is also home to an outpost of the Fromm Gang, who are constructing a superweapon called the Trigon 1. They capture Jord, but a woman named Kia Mol helps Thal and the droids rescue him. The crew heads to Anu, where Thal, Kia, and the droids sneak onto a ship headed back to the base on Ingo and manage to steal the Trigon 1. They sabotage and hide it, but are soon captured again. They reveal the Trigon's location, the Fromms retrieve it, but the sabotage causes it to crash into the gang's stronghold, destroying both. The crew heads to Bunta for the big speeder race there, pursued by some enraged Fromm Gang members who have also called in a favor from Boba Fett. The protagonists win the race despite several sabotage attempts, and the droids leave the crew on good terms. The second arc sees C-3PO and R2-D2 being auctioned to a miner named Jan Tosh. Another droid bought by Tosh is revealed to be Mon Julpa, the deposed prince of Tamazan. The new crew, including a woman named Jessica Meade, fly to Tamazan, where they reclaim Mon Julpa's throne from an evil vizier named Ko Zatek Cha. After a bit of a fight, Julpa is crowned king of Tamazan. Now employed as freighters by King Julpa, the crew are attacked and captured by a gang of pirates led by Kybo Ren. Kybo Ren, with a B. Yeah, that guy. The pirates attack Tamazan with a stolen Imperial cruiser, but the droids sabotage the ship, and the crew escapes. Later, the droids accompany another Tamazan prince named Kobe on a trip to rescue his pet cat from a group of poachers called the Star Hunters. Jan Tosh eventually goes off to the Imperial Academy, and the droids part with him on good terms. In The Great Heep, the dynamic duo is now working for a guy called Mungo Baobab. They and Mungo are separately captured by a giant droid called the Great Heep, which is working with Admiral Terranald Screed to mine fuel for the Empire. They've built a moisture eater to dehydrate the locals into submission. With the help of a local boy named Fidge, Mungo and the droids turn the tables on their captors and destroy the moisture eater. The droids remain in Mungo's service in the third arc, in which they race against Admiral Screed and Governor Kung to secure the valuable gem deposits of the planet Rune. They run into each other at the Umbu light station, and Screed captures Mungo and the droids, but they manage to escape. On Rune, after joining Arin Yam and her father Niels, the crew wins a horse race against Governor Kung's team. They find 6 bags of gems and a clue as to the whereabouts of an even larger deposit. Kung captures most of the crew aboard a sailboat, but they manage to escape at the cost of their 6 bags of gems. Later, Kung deploys a biological weapon called the Ruse disease. Niels and Orin are captured, but develop a cure for the disease while in captivity. Mungo and the droids rescue them, a fight ensues, a large cache of gems is discovered and thrown into lava, Kung succumbs to the disease, Mungo flies away, and the show ends. Like the Ewoks show, the Droids show forms the centerpiece of its own mini-franchise within Star Wars, and in fact both shows released simultaneously in 1985 and 86. The parallels between the two shows are obvious, but I'll try to avoid making too many direct comparisons unless they're actually relevant. Almost every Star Wars film has some fun droid hijinks in it, and these episodes boiled down are basically just extended scenes of that. The characterizations of R2-D2 and C-3PO are definitely the strongest parts of the show for me. 3PO's pomp and pretense are cranked up to 11, and R2's confidence and competence are on full display. The same can't really be said for the other characters though. They feel pretty bland and indistinct by comparison. While the overall episode plots are coherent and logical, the constant capture and escape formula does get a bit repetitive. Also, the moment-to-moment pacing feels pretty slow, even in the more action-oriented scenes. That tendency seems to be more a hallmark of this animation style in general, not this show in particular. The animation doesn't look all that great to begin with. I think the Ewoks show with its forests and colorful creatures was way better suited to it than the Droids show is with its focus on the technological and more muted color palette. The voice acting and sound effects are pretty good, which is to be expected given the involvement of Anthony Daniels and Ben Burt. The soundtrack really stands out, being a marked departure from the type of music we usually associate with Star Wars. It's good music, but to me it feels like more of an 80s vibe than a Star Wars vibe, if that makes sense. Definitely takes me out of the overall experience. So on its own, I'd call this show okay, but not great. But what about from a continuity standpoint? Well, being released so early in the development of the expanded universe didn't do it any favors. There are several little details and retcons that pop up without really having to go looking for them. The Rebel Alliance is referenced several times in the show, but most Legends sources agree that the Alliance wasn't formed until 2 BBY, 13 years after the show. Boba Fett is shown to already be a notorious bounty hunter, despite being only 16 years old and only in business for a few years at the time. There are A-Wings and B-Wings in the show, which weren't developed until after the Battle of Yavin, according to Legends. We see some non-Force related magic used by Ko-Zatek Cha. The Great Heep was retconned to have been an Abominor, a race of sentient droids that were once one of the dominant political forces in the Yuuzhan Vong galaxy. Actually, that one's kind of cool in my opinion. And finally, there's the Gundark in the room, Revenge of the Sith. While it's certainly possible that two droids could go missing for almost 15 years, have a bunch of adventures, and eventually end up with their original owner without once receiving a memory wipe, or ending up separated from each other, it's definitely a bit of a stretch. This entire period between the droid's departure and return feels like a parenthetical aside from the grand scheme of Star Wars. So I hope you can see just how tempting it is to just let the droids stay in Captain Antilles' service from 19 BBY to 0 BBY, by writing off the droids franchise entirely. But we're only talking about the show itself in this video, not the whole franchise. To give it as fair a verdict as possible, I'm going to just accept for the moment that the dynamic duo was in fact separated from Antilles and eventually reunited with him. Even with that concession, we're still in about the same territory as we were for the Ewoks show. As in that case, I was prepared to give the show a canonicity value of 0.1, roughly on par with the Star Tours rides. However, the cutting process proved every bit as frustrating as it did with Ewoks. All the episodes were individually labeled, some episodes were collected into anthology films, which were cited separately, and there were not one but two different series of tie-in children's books, not to mention all the cross-references with other media in the Droids franchise. So, perhaps inevitably, I just decided to declare the Droids TV show and the Great Heep to be entirely non-canon within the project, and cut them entirely. I ended up deleting 580 articles, including 296 media files, and making a total of 700 other edits to the wiki. Here's a list of all the media I cut, including the tie-in books and anthology movies. However, despite enacting a relatively scorched earth policy, these cuts do still leave a lot of loose ends, since a lot of the characters also appear in the various Droids comics, and a couple even appear in the short story Lando Calrissian Idiot's Array. With that in mind, the natural next step seems to be to tackle the various comic series in the Droids franchise, to tie up those loose ends left by these cuts. I think, for the sake of efficiency, I'll try to cover all the comics in a single video. So, until then, may the Force be with you.